Love People, Use Things podcast. I'm Matt Fradd. So I saw a tweet today by a blogger who I have a lot of respect for. I think he's written some good things in the past. His name's Matt Walsh, and he had a lot to say on pornography. Specifically, what I want to address is this idea, that pornography is not addictive. That's what he wants to say, and that's what I want to respond to in this podcast. But just to give you an example of why I respect Matt, the very top post on his Twitter account is called, and he wrote it, "How to Betray Your Wife, Destroy Her Self-Worth, and Implode Your Marriage in One Easy Step." That easy step being pornography. So awesome. Not awesome, but he's right. But is porn addictive? Well, here's a couple of things that he said that I disagree with. He said, men who use porn have a compulsion. They do not have an addiction. We need to stop medicalizing sin and stop treating people like they are powerless and incapable of improvement. Not everything is a disease or an addiction. Sometimes a man just makes a choice. Okay, so I think it's important to point out that two things can be true at once. Right? Two things can be true at once, right? It is true that people can overuse the word addiction. It is true that people can misapply the word addiction. It is true that people can sort of hide behind the word addiction, right, as a way to sort of avoid their responsibility of changing and becoming a better person. Right? Sometimes people say that they're addicted. What they really mean is, I'm a coward and I don't want to change, and I'm not going to take the steps to change because I'm a victim. Okay, so I think that's true, right? I think that's great. But it's a false dichotomy to say that either people use it as a cop-out, right, or porn is addictive. I think both can be true. All right, so I think it can also be true that pornography can be addictive. But I do think it's important that we define our terms. And this is something that I notice a lot on the internet today. People don't tend to define what they mean. We can be using terms, but we could be working with two very different concepts, right? The term is what expresses the concept. It's sort of like the package, the word, and within that package, within that term is the concept, and sometimes we're dealing with very different ideas. And so here's another thing Matt Walsh said. He said, if porn is addiction, he might mean addictive, then so is TV, so is shopping, so is food, so are video games, so is literally anything. So basically we've drained the word addiction of all discernible meaning while trivializing real addiction. Okay, so he said a lot there. All I want to address is the fact that he clearly thinks addiction is real. Right, that's what he says. He says we've drained the word of real of any discernible meaning while trivializing real addiction. So what does he mean? So what is addiction? So if addiction means something, what does it mean? Because if we want to say that pornography isn't addictive, then we need to know what we mean when we use the word addiction. So let me just say a few things here. It used to be thought that in order for something to be addictive, it had to be some sort of substance that you put into your body. But since when I say we, scientists have started looking into the brain, it's changed how we understand addiction. Right? So suppose this was someone's argument. Suppose somebody said only drugs are addictive, porn isn't a drug, therefore it's not addictive. That would be hopelessly out of touch with what we now know through modern neuroscience. All right, it's true. Pornography isn't a drug. I mean, we can say it's a drug in the colloquial sense, like fight the new drug do, but you're not inhaling it. You're not injecting it. It's not a drug. But to say, therefore, that it can't be addictive is to really show that one is out of date, out of touch with the findings of modern neuroscience. For example, in the DSM-5, there is a section for natural addictions. One of those natural addictions that they specify is pathological gambling. All right, nothing's injected when it comes to gambling. Nothing is, inhaled. But we recognize, at least a lot of people do, that gambling can be addictive. All right, so let me I want to give you three reasons why we should think porn is addictive. Okay, I want to give you three reasons to show why porn isn't addictive. But before I do that, I want to respond to an objection that I'm hearing more and more. I don't know if this is Matt Walsh's objection. I don't know if he would say this, but you notice that he did say we're trivializing real addictions. And so I've heard people say to me that porn isn't addictive, and I'll say why, and they say because withdrawal from it can't kill you. Withdrawal from it can't kill you. And I think a lot of people say this, right? And they say, so only those drugs where if you were to immediately, cease your use of it, if it could kill you, So here's a couple of reasons I think that's false. All right, things can be addictive even if you stop them and you don't die. Okay. So the first thing to say is it's true that withdrawal from certain drugs, such as, I don't know if you know this or not, this is pretty crazy, but like you can be such an alcoholic that your body becomes so dependent upon it that if you were to stop, you would die. Same thing with opioids. This can lead to death as well. Now, this is rare. All right, most people who find sobriety from these sorts of drugs do so without medical intervention. Okay. And of course, nobody would say, well, because you were able to recover without medical intervention, you weren't truly addicted. No one would say that. Okay. Here's a second point. If we accept the premise, that if withdrawal from it can't kill you, then it can't be addictive, then we should also deny that cocaine, crystal meth, nicotine can be addictive. We should deny that because withdrawal from cocaine can't kill you. Don't know if you knew that. Withdrawal from crystal meth can't kill you. Withdrawal from cigarettes can't kill you. But I don't think many people would want to say, well, therefore, nicotine isn't addictive. Thirdly, this idea between Matt Walsh used the word compulsion. Sometimes people want to say, well, it's not an addiction, it's a dependence. Well, there's a problem here. Right? There's a problem here because not only can you be addicted without being dependent, what I mean is you can be addicted and then stop the drug and not die. Right? So not only can you be addicted without being dependent, but you can actually be dependent upon something, a drug, say, without actually being addicted to it. Does that make sense? Gary Wilson from Your Brain on Porn says this, quote, millions of individuals take chronically high levels of pharmaceuticals such as opioids for chronic pain or prednisone for autoimmune conditions. Their brains and tissues have become dependent on them. An immediate cessation of use could cause severe withdrawal symptoms. However, they are not necessarily addicted. Right? In fact, some would much prefer not to be taking these medications at all. So, is porn addictive? All right, so let me give you three brief reasons, because I've written a lot about this in my book, The Porn Myth, which I'll tell you a little bit at the end of this episode how you can get a free signed copy of that. But let me just briefly say three things. Here's why we should think pornography can be addictive. Number one, in 2012, the American Society of Addiction Medicine, ASAM for short, actually modified its definition of addiction to include things like porn addiction and sex addiction. Now, the ASAM press release stated this, quote, the new definition resulted from an intensive 4-year process with more than 80 experts actively working on it, including top addiction authorities, addiction medicine clinicians, and leading neuroscience researchers from across the country. The full governing board of ASAM and chapter presidents from many states took part, and there was extensive dialogue with the National Institute on Drug Abuse. Okay? So that's the first reason. Right? If the American Society of Addiction Medicine, which spent 4 years researching this, that consulted some of the top authorities, right, the top clinicians, 80 experts, they say, and they've changed their definition of addiction to include things like porn addiction and sex addiction, we should take that seriously. An ASAM spokesman explained, and here's the quote, the new definition leaves no doubt that all addictions, whether to alcohol, heroin, or sex, say, are fundamentally the same. Dr. Raju Haleja, former president of the Canadian Society for Addiction Medicine and the chair of the ASAM committee that crafted the new definition, told The Fix, we are looking at addiction as one disease as opposed to those who see them as separate diseases. Addiction is addiction. It doesn't matter what cranks your brain in that direction. Once it has changed direction, you're vulnerable to all addiction. sex or gambling or food addiction are every bit as medically valid as addiction to alcohol or heroin or crystal meth. So again, we should take this seriously. Elsewhere, Matt Walsh said this. Okay, so somebody wrote to Matt Walsh over Twitter and said, "You don't have the credentials to be making that kind of claim." And Matt Walsh quoted the tweet, "You're right. We need doctors and psychologists with degrees and credentials to tell us why people commit sins." Yeah, see, again, I think this is a false dichotomy, all right? Matt is a Christian. He thinks that viewing pornography is a sin. Okay, that's fine. Something can be a sin, right, and still be addictive, I think. So here's the second reason that you should think that pornography is addictive. Gary Wilson runs the website yourbrainonporn.com. And as of today, he lists 37 neuroscience-based studies. When I say neuroscience-based studies, I'm talking about MRI, fMRI, EEG, neuropsychological, hormonal, right? 37 neuroscience-based studies on internet pornography users. Every single one of them supports the addiction model, okay? So, look, there's different ways we can use the term addiction, going back to defining our terms. Like, maybe we'll use it in a psychological way, hey? Maybe someone will say, repeated use in light of adverse consequences and the inability to remain free of this or that drug or behavior. I don't know. That's just one example of how we might define addiction. Or maybe we define addiction sort of colloquially, like I'm addicted to peanut butter M&Ms or something. So what do I mean when I talk about addiction? Well, when I'm talking about addiction, I'm thinking like if there was one litmus test for addiction, wouldn't it be the brain? Like, isn't that the hard evidence? Because you remember, Matt Walsh earlier said we shouldn't trivialize real addictions, and I agree with that, of course. Okay, so he does believe that real addiction is possible, and you want to say, well, what is an addiction then? And again, he might give you different definitions, but I think it's fair to say that if someone's addicted, you're going to be able to know that by looking at their brain. You're going to see things like a dull reward center. You're going to see things like atrophy in the frontal lobes. Other things. So, okay, well, if that's a pretty telltale sign of addiction, then all you'd need to do is look at different scans of internet porn users and see whether this is occurring. And to go back to what I said a moment ago, this is exactly what we're seeing in these 37 neuroscience-based studies. Okay, and so for that reason, I think we should conclude that pornography can be addictive. Okay, pornography can be addictive. In the show notes to this podcast, I'm going to throw up a link to Gary Wilson's website, yourbrainonporn.com, so you can look at all these links for yourself. These links, by the way, you click them and they go directly to a sort of the university's website where you can read the actual the peer-reviewed paper for yourself. Now, I think one of the reasons that people say that pornography can't be addictive is because of bad science, quite frankly. If you were to go online right now and say porn isn't addictive, you would find a lot of articles out there. You'll find articles. I did this actually before I recorded this podcast. Articles from, the BBC, articles from Psychology Today, articles from Cosmopolitan Magazine, articles from wherever else. Now, all of these articles, or almost all of them, I should say, have one thing in common. They cite an EEG study by Nicole Prouse. Okay, an EEG study is a study that measures brain waves. It's not very in-depth. It's very cheap to do. So Nicole Prouse did two different studies, one in 2013, one in 2015, and she claims that her studies have disproved that pornography can be addictive, which is a pretty kind of bold and I'm even going to say arrogant thing to say, right? I mean, that you've got two lone studies and you think that this alone is going to somehow, do away with all the other evidence. Because you remember earlier I said there's 37 peer-reviewed neuroscience-based studies. Okay, two of them are Nicole Prouse's. And you might think, wait, what does that? What do you mean by that? Or didn't you just say that these show that porn is addictive. No, they don't. See, there's a big difference. We have to make this distinction between the findings of science and the interpretation of those findings. Okay, and here's the problem with those two different studies that Nicole Prouse did. There have been multiple peer-reviewed papers that say that she's wrong, that actually her findings prove porn addiction, right? That they're consistent, at least, with the effects of addiction. So I'm going to throw up, and again, there's about, 10 or 11 papers by some of the top neuroscientists, all looking at Prouse's findings and saying, you're wrong, right? They actually prove the opposite. They actually show that porn's addictive. So I'll throw that up in the show notes as well, because I really want you to be able to look into this for yourself. I don't want you to take my word for it, because I'm no more a neuroscientist than you are, or than Matt Walsh is. I think what should matter to us is the evidence. So the next time you're online and you see something that says porn isn't addictive, you might want to just use Control-Command-F, okay, and type in Prouse, because the chances are her heavily criticized work will be cited, while the non-Prouse neurological studies, that's 35 of them, will be omitted. And that's a problem. Now, does that mean that we shouldn't accept responsibility for our own lives? Does that mean that we should make excuses, play the victim, abuse the term addiction? No, it doesn't. Like, you're responsible, right? Maybe you're addicted right now and you got into this mess, okay? Don't sit there and play the victim. Do something about it. And I think two things that would really help if you think you're genuinely addicted, and there's lots of different signs for this. Again, my book, The Porn Myth, as well as Gary Wilson's excellent book, Your Brain on Porn, can help you decipher that and see what those effects are. But I would say finding a good certified sex addiction therapist, and that's not hard to do. You can find them online in your area. And then secondly, maybe a good SA group. Like, these are ways that you can stop playing the victim and actually rewrite your future, because it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. Okay, before I share with you the one awesome movement website that I want to promote today, every week we promote a new excellent anti-porn, pro-love movement website, however you want to put it. Before I do that, I want to tell you how you can join the Love People Use Things campaign and get a bunch of free stuff in return. So I travel the country and I give talks to literally tens of thousands of university students and teenagers every year, okay? And when I do, I really want to leave them with good material. So right now, I'm kind of trying to raise enough money to print these little booklets out, as well as create these cool little pledge cards so that these teenagers and university students can sign them and say, yeah, I'm gonna pledge to not look at porn. I'm gonna pledge to love people and to use things. And if I fall down, I'm going to get back up. But in order to do that, I need money to do it. So if you want to join the Love People Use Things campaign, that's $10 a month. Here's what I'll give you in return. It's pretty cool, actually. You'll get a signed copy of my book, The Porn Myth, Exposing the Reality Behind the Fantasy of Pornography, for free. I'll ship that to your door no matter where you live in the world. I'll also send you the great book, Equipped: Smart Parenting in a Sexualized World by Amanda Zerfas. You'll also get 1 month of Covenant Eyes for free. I'll send you a free Love People Use Things sticker. You'll get 25% off our awesome Love People Use Things t-shirts. You'll also get free access to live stream events for men. We're going to have some for women. We're going to have some for both men and women, and some for parents. So if you want the full Love People Use Things experience, you need to be supporting us for $10 a month, and we send that out every month as a thank you for you joining us in this mission. So again, the way you would become part of the Love People Use Things campaign is by going to lovepeopleusethings.fm. That's lovepeopleusethings.fm. Click support, and there it'll take you to Patreon. You can support for as little as $10 a month, and we'll do that. We'll send those things to you. All right, I've already mentioned him a bunch in this episode, so I want to just totally give a shout out to Gary Wilson from yourbrainonporn.com. That's the one website not just a website, it's the man behind the website. Gary Wilson is awesome. You may have seen his TED talk on pornography. It was very good. He's got a fantastic book by the same name as his website, yourbrainonporn.com. He actually just came out with a second edition of the book, and it's helped a lot of people. Whenever I look at the top-selling books on Amazon under pornography addiction, his is almost always beating mine, and rightly so. It's a very good book. So, Your Brain on Porn, Internet Pornography and the Emerging Science of Addiction. So you can check that out and check out his fantastic website, yourbrainonporn.com. As I said, he links to all these different studies so you can get it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. I was recently giving a talk at some university in Colorado State University, and someone came up to me and they said they wanted to write an article or a paper against pornography and show why all this research is coming out. And unfortunately, there's still this myth out there that it must be religious. Like, it must be religious. Well, look, like Matt Fradd, I'm religious, okay? But that doesn't mean I'm wrong. And in fact, Gary Wilson, who runs the website yourbrainonporn.com, he isn't religious. And all he does is link to these different studies. So it's very objective, very good. So be sure to check out that, yourbrainonporn.com, yourbrainonporn.com. I hope this has been a helpful episode for you. Check us out at lovepeopleusethings.fm, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye.